Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Forbes senior editor, Dan Alexander. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
On the heels of Trump's indictment, your reporting suggests more bad news for the former president. This time, his net worth taking a tumble since last fall. So, Dan, can you paint a picture for us? How did this happen?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that, Donald Trump, after he left the presidency, remember he had just been banned by Twitter, and he said, wait a second, this is a huge business opportunity. I'm not on Twitter. Everybody wants to hear from me. And so he created a company called Truth Social. The parent company is the Trump Media and Technology Group. And he launched that company in October of 2021 publicly, saying that it was going to merge with a SPAC. And investors got super excited about it and pushed the shares of the SPAC to the moon. And it looked like he had suddenly, out of thin air, created an incredibly valuable asset, even valuing his shares at $10, which is a fraction of what they were trading for on the open market. That asset looked like it was worth about $730 million, which was more than anything else in Donald Trump's entire portfolio. What's happened since is that Truth Social has flopped. Not enough people showed up. The merger that's supposed to happen with the SPAC may or may not happen at all. There are investigations from every regulatory authority that you could be afraid of, and that's slowing down the merger. In addition, Donald Trump wasn't the only one seeing a business opportunity with Twitter's banning of conservatives. And when Elon Musk purchased Twitter, it sort of rendered Donald Trump's business plan moot. Why do we need a more conservative Twitter that doesn't have bans on a bunch of conservatives when Elon Musk just got rid of all the bans on a bunch of conservatives, including the one on Donald Trump? Now, Trump himself is not posting on Twitter right now. He's still staying true to Truth Social. But nonetheless, not enough people have showed up. And it looks like, based on the number of users who have, like Donald Trump's stake is worth less than $200 million. So we estimate that it's wiped off $550 million so far, and it could go down even more.
You reported that the hype of Truth Social didn't line up with the reality, and this is based on a few factors, as you said, including Elon Musk purchasing Twitter and making it more of a conservative safe haven. So was this a bad business idea from the start, or were these a few unforeseen circumstances that really threw a wrench into Truth Social?
Well, at the very start, it was nothing more than an idea. And it's hard to say when you have just an idea whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Certainly, a lot of people got excited about it. So, by that measure, you could say that it was a good idea. But as time has gone on and it's become something more than just an idea, it's become something more like an actual business. What we've seen is that the projections that they were putting out there, what this could become, are nowhere close to what it's actually become. So, yes, they've faced hurdles, the investigations, Elon Musk, all of that. But the fundamental problem here is that if you're trying to start a social media app, you need to draw huge numbers of people onto it. And at the start, they predicted that by 2026, they would have 81 million users. Right now, they have about 5 million. And the thing's been open for more than a year. So you can do the math there that they're not going to get to 81 million. And in fact, if you look at how many they're adding right now, and the growth has started to slow in recent months, it could take them well into the next, dozens of years before they got there. And so ultimately, what you're looking at is, okay, this is not going to be what they projected it to be. And then you have the question of, with this tiny social media company, can you even produce enough revenue to pay for your expenses? And that's ultimately going to be what determines whether this thing is just a tiny blip on the radar in terms of Donald Trump's overall fortune, or whether it's a zero and the thing goes out of business.
You mentioned that the merger between Trump Media and Technology Group, which owns Truth Social, and another SPAC might not happen. Why is that?
Well, first of all, it was supposed to happen, relatively quickly. But all of these investigations have basically held things up. And so as a result, the SPAC has had to now extend the date by which it was going to merge 3 times. And it still could do it a 4th time. But eventually you run out of the number of times that you're allowed to keep extending things. And at that point, the SPAC, which is essentially just a shell company with a boatload of cash that's going to merge that pile of cash into Trump's company, the shell company will have to return all of that cash back to its investors. But one of the sad things here is that if that happens, and it very well may, then these investors who are buying shares of the SPAC at prices as high as $175 per share, they're only going to get, less than $10 probably returned to them in cash. So they're going to end up with huge losses of all of these people who just got really excited about this idea of being in business with Donald Trump.
You said investors could lose tremendous amounts of money here. How are they feeling about Truth Social today?
Well, the truth is a lot of people already have lost tremendous amounts of money. If you look at the prices at which Truth Social was trading in October and November of 2021, right after the idea of this thing came about, it was through the roof. Like I said, the highest that it ever traded was $175 a share, but they were exchanging at every number between there and where they are today, which is roughly $14. And so anyone who bought basically at any point has already lost money. And investors, it's interesting. Obviously, there are certain people who are, keeping the faith, but you've got to imagine that if you open up your account and see that you've lost, in some cases, 90% of your money, that you're not very happy about it. Even if you go on to Reddit, where a lot of this trading was being bantied about, in the same way that things like GameStop or any of those other meme stocks were trading, there's no longer much enthusiasm for the SPAC that's going to merge with Trump's company. It used to be that there were tons of posts from all these people hyping it up, super excited about it. I logged onto it last night just to see what people were saying, and it was crickets. Nobody just seems very enthusiastic about the thing at this point.
Dan, let's fast forward to this week when we saw Trump get indicted in Manhattan. So how will this impact Truth Social? You go on Twitter, Donald Trump hasn't tweeted since January 2021. Now he's the A block of every news channel from now until who knows when. This is an ongoing story. It's, injecting him back into that news cycle. Is this good news for Truth Social?
Certainly a lot of retail investors believe that it is. Shares of the SPAC that's going to merge with Trump's business rose by about 10% overnight after the indictment came out. So in kind of an interesting way, you have retail investors betting that the indictment is actually going to, in some ways, help Donald Trump and make at least one of his assets richer. By their math, it would boost the value of that asset by $100 million or so. And obviously, if the shares continue to climb, it could get even sweeter for Trump. But, we've seen this before where there are momentary blips where the price of the SPAC that's merging with Trump's business rises. This happened when Trump announced that he was going to run for president again. Same sort of thing that you're talking about. People are excited about, hey, he's going to be on TV, he's going to be on the front page of every newspaper, and people have to listen to him. So therefore, you're going to have much more people signing up for Truth Social. And if you all of a sudden have that user base, then you're likely to attract more advertisers. That means more revenue for the business, could be great for the business. That's the case for that investors were looking at last night, why they were buying up shares of the stock. But what we've seen is that although there are these momentary spikes, then they tend to just gradually peter out and end up lower than they were even before the spike. And my guess is that in this case, we're going to see a similar thing because the numbers at which it's trading right now make no sense at all when you look at the number of users that Trump's business actually has. It should be trading much, much lower than it currently is. But there are still just a bunch of people who trust Donald Trump and want to be in business with him. And so that's propping things up at the moment.
Dan, that's interesting you say that because in your piece you mentioned the graveyard of Donald Trump ventures, including, Trump's college thing or Trump University, things like that. Why do people still believe in him to invest in him like that?
I think that if you look at Donald Trump in some way, you can see anything you want to see. You can see a string of failures. You can also see enormous success. And depending on your perspective and what you want to see, you could look at Trump's business past and say, hey, here's a guy who's made a ton of money and has really good business instincts. And oh, by the way, also managed to get himself elected president of the United States. I mean, how do you define success if not by that? This is somebody that I want to be in business with. But you can also, of course, look at Trump Steaks, GoTrump.com, Trump branded this, that, and you can say none of this stuff exists anymore. And it's all petered out and failed. Why would you ever want to be in business with this person? In this case, unfortunately, for those who are betting on Trump, I think that it's more likely to end up petering out and sharing some graveyard space with some of those earlier ventures.
And on a separate note, is he the first person that you've ever reported on that could potentially make money after an indictment or because of the indictment?
I can't think of another. But, if you're a media person, oftentimes controversy, maybe not indictments, does help your stock price. If you look, for instance, at what happened to Facebook shares in 2017, 18, 19, when, everyone seemed to be criticizing Facebook, both on the left and the right, saying that it was a garbage platform. And yet there was tons of people on Facebook and tons of attention, and advertisers were paying huge money to have ads on there. And therefore the stock price of Facebook soared. And so if you're a media person, it does make some sense that controversy could boost your business. An indictment, of course, is a different level of controversy, though.
And what about Truth Social? What's next for the platform, do you think?
Well, it's sort of petering along. It gains about 100,000 users per month. That's really not much. Right now, it has about 5 million users. So you're talking about adding maybe 1 million per year. Again, it takes a long way to get to that 81 million that they had ultimately were hoping to get to by 2026. So, they have to figure out whether or not they can complete this merger, see what happens with these investigations. If the merger does not go through, then Trump's business is going to have to figure out some other way to operate, either on its own or by raising money from private investors, venture capitalists, having Trump himself inject money into the business. But there are serious concerns about whether it will continue to be able to exist without an infusion of capital. And right now, the SPAC infusion does not look super promising.
Dan Alexander, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.